Hi all, we're going to look at the Kansas Nebraska Act, which is a really important stepping stone towards the American Civil War. So it's a really important act, really divides America and has really wide-ranging impact and consequences. So a really important part of the study of the build-up to the American Civil War. So the kind of context of what was going on. So you'd had the Missouri Compromise all the way back in 1820, which had divided up the Louisiana Purchase, which you can see on the screen, with the area above the 3630 line, the unorganized territory, not being open to slavery, and the stuff below the 3630 line, the Arkansas Territory, being open to slavery. There'd been then all the addition of territory taken from Mexico and the annexation of Texas. And this had all kind of been sorted out in the 1850 compromise that we looked at in a previous video. Now, the population was starting to rise in the unorganized territory, which was going to become Kansas and Nebraska territories. Nebraska would then break up into a series of other territories and then a whole range of different states later on. The kind of key to this, the push at this moment to create territories in this area in a slightly more organized way was the development of the Transcontinental Railroad, in particular feeding in from the Midwest. So we've got a series of things coming together, and we've got obviously the background of Manifest Destiny and all of that as well. Right, so why in particular in a bit more detail? So we've got Stephen Douglas, who will remember from the 1850 Compromise, and he wanted to see this development of this Midwestern Transcontinental Railroad. To do this, he needed to organize Nebraska and Kansas into territories so people could settle there and give us a safe route with kind of organized government going through for the railroad. Why is it so important to him? Well, he is from Illinois, and to make Illinois and a central part of the Midwest, and to bring money into Illinois, then the ideal is this transcontinental railroad, which is going to connect the Midwest up to both the east and to the west, all the way over to California, and therefore make it a kind of really key central hub. So it's part of his political ambition for his own state. It's also partly part of his political ambition for himself. Stephen Douglas is highly ambitious. He wants to be president. This is another example of him pushing things that he thinks are going to stand him in good stead politically. Actually, the reality turns out to be quite the opposite. He also saw this as an opportunity to kind of make a great statement of principle for the government. And this principle was the idea that people made the decisions for themselves rather than it being imposed on them from Congress. And this idea was called popular sovereignty. It'd been used for the New Mexico territory during the 1850 Compromise. And Douglas simply wanted to transfer what he'd done there in 1850 and move it into Kansas and Nebraska in 1854. So this all links in with the previous stuff that we've seen in terms of Manifest Destiny, the desire for more land. And there's more and more pressure for land in the east. That land is becoming more and more expensive as there's more and more people settling in the United States and the population is growing. And that's kind of pushing this kind of frontier spirit, this desire for land and settlement. If any of you studied the American West at GCSE, you have done also looks at stuff like the development of technology and other things that were making land that was previously not suitable settlement suitable. And there was also the clash going on at this point, which is about to get a lot worse with the Native American tribes. So it's all part of a really big, important part of the story, part of American history with this movement west. Now, Kansas, Nebraska is going to open a whole can of worms. So what was it exactly? Well, to absolutely pin it down, it created the territories of Kansas and Nebraska. Nebraska later on would splinter up into smaller territories, as you can see on the map on this slide. It was absolutely gigantic to start off with. The issue of slavery within each territory then would be decided by popular sovereignty at the point that that territory or part of that territory applied for statehood. No, the idea of this was to remove the pressure and the arguing and the wranglings in Congress. Really, it doesn't have that impact, but that was the aim. Take that responsibility away. It also includes the scrapping of the Missouri Compromise back from 1820, and that goes all together. So how does it get done? Well, previously, the idea of offering formalized territories and the potential route into statehood for this area had kind of been blocked by the South because it's above the 3630 line, and it's a big piece of land, and there's a chance of multiple states coming into being, and this would tip the balance in the Senate and further tip the balance in the House of Representatives. And so the South have been very resistant to this area entering into kind of formal organized territories. Douglas tries to reassure the South and saying, look, it's been popular sovereignty. I'm essentially saying this area is open to slavery. And there have been previous things in the past about this area that have said slavery can't happen, but that was the same in Mexico. Mexican law was against slavery. But the South wanted more reassurance, and Archibald Dixon, who was Senator of Kentucky, was key in this. So he met with Douglas and said, look, if the South are going to back this, you need to formally scrap the Missouri Compromise. And Douglas actually agreed to this. Next tricky person you had to win over was President Pierce. Pierce was not initially particularly keen on the idea. He took a bit of persuasion, but Douglas was very persuasive and managed to convince Pierce it was a good idea. The Senate took the unorganized territory, divided into the two bits, Kansas and Nebraska, as we saw on the previous slide with the map. There were many who spoke against it, and there's a very long kind of process of getting it through Congress. Starts in January, runs all the way through to the end of March. There's numerous people like Salmon P. Chase, who's an abolitionist and free soiler, and he spoke out very fervently against it. And there was a lot of bitter dispute between the North and South on it. Sam Houston from Texas was almost like a lone voice in the South, saying this was a terrible idea and it was just going to kind of create more sectional tension, and so we shouldn't do it. But most of the South was in support. And eventually, the law passed through both houses of Congress, largely because the Democrats held majorities in both houses, and Pierce imposed party discipline and used the promise of federal office and things like that to kind of shove it all through. And so it passes. Well, what's the impact of all this? Well, the impact is gigantic, and this is kind of stuff that we'll look at in future videos. So it ends the Missouri Compromise, and that's been in place since 1820. So this is a big move. So Congress had thought essentially slavery was settled, that they had to reconvene on it really in 1850 when all this new territory was added from Mexico. But the old kind of settlement is now gone. So we enter an area of kind of free-for-all in terms of new states entering, whether they're going to be free or slave. The consequences of Kansas are absolutely horrendous, and we see a period known as Bleeding Kansas, where there is violence between pro and anti-slavery groups. We see rival governments being set up. People like John Brown come to prominence. He is involved in a massacre where he's said to have killed people with a broadsword. So we really do see, and some historians even go as far as to talk as this has been the beginning of the Civil War, because it's the first kind of real sectional violence that we see. Sectionalism is really strongly increased, and it really divides North and South. This has lots of political ramifications. It damages the Democrats in the North in the midterms in '54. It gives rise to the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, eventually, that we will see take power in 1860. And the Republican Party is a northern-only party. So this is really the end of the second party system. So the Whigs can't come up with a sensible policy. The Whigs, already in a really bad way, completely collapse. The Know Nothings, the American Party that had kind of come in and started to fill the void that the Whigs had been leaving since 52, again, they can't really deal with this issue, and it takes all the focus away from nativist ideas and focuses it all on the idea of slavery and expansion of slavery and sectional tension. So most of this kind of really undermines them. The Democrats remain, but their northern support is weakened. The Republicans emerge as a northern, a kind of anti-slavery expansion party. Kansas explodes into violence and chaos. And really, this is the beginning of the real strong steps towards the Civil War. Right, thank you for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. This is part of the American History series, and I will continue to take us through the rest of the 1850s, through the Civil War itself, and into Reconstruction over future weeks and months with additional videos. Thank you very much.